Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Masks Off. I am Kim.
And I'm Tia.
And today we have a guest with us. We have Sylvia Farbstein. And before we do a formal introduction or let Sylvia introduce herself, I'm going to start with a quote today and just say that we have a really, really good topic for a conversation. Like, I cannot wait to see where this goes. I'm super excited. So let me start with our quote. If life were predictable, it would cease to be life and be without flavor. And that's from Eleanor Roosevelt. So, okay, Sylvia, tell us about yourself and how your story and your background ties into that quote.
Thank you so much for having me here. I'm so excited for this conversation. That quote really resonates with me because I am someone who used to be obsessed with certainty. I was raised to get top grades so that I could go to a great university. I went to NYU. I majored in finance. I knew I wanted a career in banking. And I worked in New York City. I was there for several years and was climbing up the corporate ladder and totally had my life planned out. And then I went on a blind date and met this man who lived in Richmond, Virginia, and within 11 months ended up being married and moved to Richmond from New York City. And my whole sense of certainty sort of went out the window. And I should have had a hint of that because I happened to be my husband's 95th blind date. Yes, he went out with 94 women that he was set up with. And then he and I met through a college friend of his who I ended up working with at this bank. So life sort of came full circle. And I took this chance and met this stranger and totally uprooted my entire future plan to make a commitment and spend the rest of my life with this man. And so I learned very quickly on that you cannot continuously compare your new season of life to the old season or a new place that you move to the way life was where you came from. And so I started navigating a little bit of uncertainty, but it truly wasn't until my second child was born that I learned to really take hold of it. So I ended up working and having two kids. My daughter Brooke is now 24 years old. And 2.5 years after she was born, our son Brandon, who is turning 22 this week actually, was born. And everything seemed to be going fine. I continued to work and juggle life. And I took him on his 2-year checkup. And although the pediatrician told me everything looked great, something in my gut told me otherwise. It seemed like his torso was growing in length, but his limbs were shorter. And so I mentioned that to the doctor and he said, you know what, why don't you get him undressed again and let me take a closer look. And as soon as he did that, he right away sent us to a geneticist. And so that experience really taught me how important it is to tune into your gut, your intuition, your inner voice. And that wasn't something that came naturally to me because I always thought that authority, came from a place of knowing and certainty. But that's not the case, not even with our, trained medical professionals. Sometimes we as moms truly have to hone into that gut feeling that we have. And so as it turned out, they sent us to the hospital for a full skeletal x-ray. None of the local doctors here in Virginia knew what they were looking at, but they knew that my son had something going on. They sent his x-rays to the UCLA Skeletal Dysplasia Registry, where it took them 6 months to diagnose him with a very rare form of dwarfism called metatropic dysplasia. Brandon is one of less than 100 medically documented cases in the world. So when my husband and I got this news, we both kind of went from having things boxed in and, the bows were tied, the I's were dotted, the T's were crossed, to having a life of all these questions. And that was really pre-internet and pre-support groups in the beautiful land of Facebook. And we made a commitment to ourselves very early on. And we said, we're not going to have the answers as it pertains to Brandon's future, but what we are going to commit to is giving him the best life possible. So we basically strapped ourselves in and went on this journey of asking lots of questions and being inquisitive and honing into our curiosity so that we would be able to help navigate Brandon through a life that we knew was going to be filled with challenges.
Wow. I mean, it's such a beautiful unfolding that you just shared of coming from so much certainty, or the belief you had all the certainty, right? And then life circumstances, from meeting your husband and then becoming a mother and transitioning into this unknown and medical uncertainty, not just for you and for Brandon and your family, but the doctors clearly did not have a lot of certainty either. And so that adds another flavor into that uncertainty of life, I imagine, that you experienced as well. But shifting into that being curious and inquisitiveness and knowing your intention of creating the best life seemed to be the driver for you to stay in that place of uncertainty. Is like, okay, but what's next? What's next? So if you hadn't tapped into your intuition and pushed, I'm sure it would have come out at some point, but you were luckily listening in. And so you gained that information sooner than you would have. What do you feel if I'm trying to think of the words I'm looking for. What do you think someone else may have experienced getting that information and felt the uncertainty and didn't shift into curiosity? Because I'm sure you've talked to other families and other situations as you share this important message that other people go to some other extreme. And so how does that show up for them? And then how do you support them to shift back into, curiosity and questioning and wondering while still having that beautiful intention in place?
I think it's very natural when you get unexpected news to view it through a lens of fear and feel stuck and paralyzed because, especially as moms, we kind of have this vision of how we want to raise our kids and who we want them to become. And you sort of, you get this surprise diagnosis, and it could very well paralyze you to just feel stuck and take you down this rabbit hole of limitations. And oh my goodness, this isn't the life that I signed up for. I don't want my child to go through this. And so it is when we take a step back and look at what are the drivers of these anxious thoughts that we're having and these stressful feelings that may be taking over us, when we realize that we can sort of peel back the layers and see that it's coming from a sense of fear. And where is that fear coming from? Well, that fear is coming from a lack of control, because in our minds, we thought we had their future all spelled out, right? We had this beautiful design of what life is going to be like. And this goes so against that plan and so against our sense of normal. So I feel like it's all about perspective and just honing into, where is this coming from? It's okay for me to have these difficult feelings, but let me take a step back and try to understand where they're coming from. And, part of what we had to navigate is sharing Brandon's diagnosis with our family and helping them walk through it. And they felt really sad for us. And we didn't want people's pity.
Right.
We wanted, right? We wanted like a tribe that embraced us, that made us feel supported. And there's a very big difference between someone holding space for you and walking alongside you on your journey versus someone who just sort of makes you feel like there's something wrong, right? And they're feeling like all this pity, and that's not a great feeling. So this entire experience has helped me truly widen my lens, not just to see things through our perspective and through Brandon's perspective, but also understand where people are coming from, because sometimes they are going to say the wrong thing, but they may not realize it. So we have to give ourselves grace, and we have to give each other grace in the process.
Right. And that's so important too, because like you said, they're having their response or their reaction, not understanding. And that does put pressure on you to have to navigate. Were you able to say, you know what I need from you right now? I understand that you're feeling this, but here's what we as a family would love to feel from you. Is that something that's is that how you approached it, or did it take time to get there?
It took time to get there, but what really helped us was a reality show on TLC called Little People, Big World.
Oh, yeah.
So that show happened to coincide, with the timing of Brandon's diagnosis. And soon my family got immersed in watching it and realizing he can have a full, beautiful life and not be limited because of the reality that they saw in the Roloff family and all of their great adventures.
And what a beautiful perspective shift that was able to be. I mean, the timing, universe is amazing, right? That showed up at that time.
For sure. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Because, like I said, there really wasn't Google or the internet, for me to show them examples. And truthfully, within the medical community, they weren't able to provide me with anything other than these outdated textbooks that I learned, that there were many different forms of dwarfism. I had no idea, but ours this doesn't run in our family. It was a genetic mutation. And there are hundreds of different forms. And these old medical books just had these horrific black and white photos of all of these deformities. So, my question is, well, why can't we talk about how people are living their lives versus just showing photos of, the worst of the worst. Right. And that really makes me so excited to be able to share our story on platforms such as this amazing podcast, because I feel like the more people that understand that we can embrace these surprises and these diagnoses without putting ourselves in a dark hole, then the more it just opens their minds up to embrace all of the twists and turns that they're ultimately going to find in their own lives.
Yeah.
So one of the things that Tia and I talk about a lot on the show is, and what you're describing is coming from an abundant mindset. You're having an abundant mindset. And, I have a story of my own as well, that back in 2005, I was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease that took me 6 years to even get a diagnosis, just because they didn't understand or know what Sjogren's was. And so they would just tell me I was crazy. But when I finally got the diagnosis, it was so bittersweet, right? Like, okay, finally, I'm not crazy. There is something going on, but there was so much fear, like, oh my God, I have 2 young kids and I have this autoimmune disease that I know nothing about. Is this a death sentence? I had no idea. And I also embraced it by joining, the National Sjogren's Foundation. I got involved. I did fundraising. I took control of my health. I started changing things, working on myself, and, doing something positive with it and coming from a different approach. However, two things. One, I don't know if all people, I shouldn't even say all or nothing, but how difficult is that to get into that space? Do you feel like it was difficult for you, or is that just naturally how you are and who you are, to just be positive and optimistic and come from an abundant mindset? Or was it this whole kind of like phase that you had to go through to get to this place of, let me raise awareness, let me take the bull by the horn, let me be positive, let me go and educate people, and Brandon can have a full life coming from there? Was it a process, or is that just you and who you are?
That's a great, great question. It was definitely an evolution. So I remember initially not even wanting to share with people Brandon's diagnosis. I didn't want him to be labeled. I didn't want them to look at him again in a pitiful way, or make him feel othered or different or not enough. And so it took me a while to get comfortable with even talking about it. And then we found ourselves, in addition to the medical challenges that Brandon had and the 2 sets of leg surgeries that he had at Johns Hopkins at the age of 4 and at the age of 8, we found that as he went into his middle school years and was 10, 11 years old, he became depressed and was diagnosed with depression, and actually came home from middle school one day and shared with me that he wanted to take his life. And thank God I have a child who was willing to share these excruciating, painful feelings with me. But at the same time, I wasn't prepared for this, and I had no idea what to do. But something in me said, you're going to have to figure this out on my own. And the reason I had this in my inner voice is, again, I didn't want friends or family members to look at Brandon and say, oh, he's the one who is a little person and he's having these mental health struggles, because I wanted them to just see Brandon as a human being. So my husband and I, for years, navigated these uncharted waters on our own. Thankfully, we found an amazing team, not just of medical doctors, but of mental health professionals who helped Brandon. And I must add that it took us like 6 different counselors and therapists to find the right fit. And I implore every parent out there to not give up. Even if you think it's not helping your child, just keep an open mind and search for that right fit. That makes all the difference in the world. And even if your child doesn't have any serious mental health struggles, it's really important to make them realize, just like they go for their physical and their eye checkup, it's important for them to realize that there are always mental health professionals that could be part of their team. So anyway, I didn't open up with anything until Brandon was 15 years old and decided on his own that he was going to start talking about this. And his first public speech was a TEDx talk. And so I just remember leading up to that, I had sleepless nights. I did not know whether his story would be accepted. I didn't know how people would look at him, because, he started talking about being bullied and, those kind of struggles. And it ended up being the greatest gift. And that's when I realized that the more open and authentic and vulnerable we are with each other, the more we realize, A, we're not the only ones. We're not isolated in this situation. And B, we give permission to everyone else to share their stories. And you know what? We're all going through something, right? Even if the Facebook highlight reels and Instagram posts look amazing, everyone is going through something behind closed doors. So it really did take a process for me to evolve and come to a place where I realized that my son made the decision that he wanted to share all these things. And that kind of gave me permission to go on this journey and start speaking about this.
I love that, because even throughout the process of you holding back and dealing with this as a family, navigating for fear of pity, for those fears, right? You also were honoring his path. And when he was ready to share his voice, because really it wasn't a lot of that was not your story to tell, that was his story.
Yes.
And what a beautiful gift, like you said, how this all unfolded. And now he is making his way in the world, doing all this amazing stuff and helping people and supporting people. And you're doing the same as well from your perspective as his parent and the navigating of everything that you have been through. Because while you were on the path together, you were living different experiences. And I just love that. It's so beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah. And you bring up a great point. The fact that we as parents really need to be intentional about honoring the path and the journey of our children. They're all on different timelines. Some of them are going to be on the narrow, predictable path, and others are going to be just swerving and creating their own path. And we need to sort of, buckle in and be there for the ride and not force them to not be true to themselves. So that's a huge life lesson, because I don't know about you, but the way I was raised, I don't really feel like I received that space from my parents. I felt like I was being directed more than I was being guided,
Right.
so to speak.
Yeah.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, 100%. So can you say some more about this whole, and it, like, even with the quote, this, and you talk about having curiosity. Can you say more about the curiosity piece, how that ties into the whole story, how that ties into, like, when, we've been talking about a lot about the situations when there's some fear, the fear of the unknown, right? In your son's case, I was talking about a health scare. When we go to that place of fear and the uncertainty, but where does curiosity fall into all that?
Yeah, so I've got a couple of prime examples to share with you. The first is when Brandon had his second set of surgery on his legs at Johns Hopkins. We went to the same orthopedic surgeon, and we kind of thought, well, we know what this drill is going to be all about. He'll spend a few days in the hospital and we'll bring him home and his legs will be in casts and he'll recuperate. We'll have a wheelchair, so on and so forth. Well, they wheel him out of the OR, and he not only has 2 casts on his legs, he has a bar in the middle. So this is called a spica cast. And basically the bar holds your legs stable. So your legs are like this, and you've got like a bar in the middle.
Wow.
And I looked at the doctor and I said, "What is this?" And he said, "Oh, didn't I tell you? This time he needed a spica cast because this was a more extensive surgery, and this is how we're going to ensure that his legs heal and all that." And I said, "But how in the world are we supposed to get him dressed? He doesn't wear dresses. Like, how, can we get him dressed?" And the doctor just kind of shrugged and, went on his way. And at first I was like, holy moly, what are we supposed to do here? And then I realized, you know what? I've got like this tribe of friends who said to me, please just reach out with whatever struggles you have. And so I did. And I reached out to one who is an incredibly resourceful seamstress. And she said, all right, I know exactly what we're going to do. You're going to get a few pairs of sweatpants that are a couple of sizes too big. I am going to cut the seams. I'm going to sew Velcro in, and you'll be able to Velcro his, pants on.
Wow.
That is brilliant.
Yeah.
And so it made me realize that we don't always have to have the solutions at our fingertips, and they don't have to be the tried and true solutions, because at that time, I couldn't go into a store and find anything that was constructed that way. But what I have realized over time, that those are called like basketball pants, right? With
Yes, the flyaway pants that the
Exactly.
NBA players wear.
Exactly. Now we know what it is, but so it really made me so thankful to be open to these out of the box solutions. And then the other story I have for you is when Brandon was 14 years old, and we took him, this was another orthopedic surgeon, and this surgeon knew that Brandon already went through 2 extensive operations. And Brandon said, listen, doc, my legs hurt after walking a couple of city blocks. What do you think you can do to take the pain away? What operation do I need now? And the doctor looked at him and he said, Brandon, I cannot look you in the eye and tell you that there is a set of surgeries that will take the pain away. So Brandon looked at him and he said, well, so what do I do? And he said, well, you better start thinking about a mobility device. So when it came to a mobility device, Brandon knew that he didn't want to be in one of those huge motorized scooters that, you go to Walmart and you see some senior citizens in. And he also knew he didn't want to be in a wheelchair, because he said to the doctor, why would I put myself in a position to not use my legs when my legs work? And why would I want to look up at the world even more than I am already doing?
Wow.
So the doctor looked at him and he said, well, Brandon, I hear you, but what else is there? And Brandon said, well, what about a Segway?
I love that.
And so instead of the doctor saying, that is a crazy idea, I've never seen anyone use that as a mobility device, he instead said, you know what? I don't know if that'll work for you, but why don't you give it a try? And so being open to these possibilities where you're not just thinking outside of the box, you're throwing that box out and you're creating your own solution. I mean, that is such a beautiful thing.
It is.
So, that makes us realize that we are never in a position to retreat and not have answers. The answers are there. We just have to be open to the possibilities. And to take it a couple of steps further, a few months after that doctor's appointment, I happened to be at a promotional products trade show, because that's the other business that I'm involved in. And lo and behold, in one of these booths was a device that was a mini Segway. So the world just came together from all these different sources. And truthfully, if I had been in a state of mind where I was rushing through the trade show and didn't really take a look and be curious about different things that different vendors offered, I would have lost out on this opportunity. And that I have seen play out in my life and in Brandon's life time and time again. We will meet these random strangers. For example, the one that we met at the airport, when Brandon was riding this upward mobility device, this woman just started talking to him and wouldn't stop. And it ended up that she is one of the initial curators of TED Talks. And because of that relationship, that led him to the TED stage a few months later.
Wow.
So if we don't have a sense of openness and curiosity to connect and to see the possibilities in all these places, then we're limiting ourselves, right? Then we're missing out on just some beautiful experiences and beautiful moments in life that could open doors that we never even knew existed.
Right. And I love that story so much because there's so many layers, you know. Brandon had the wherewithal and that intuitive thing, like, that is not right for me. This is what I'd like to explore, you know. So he spoke up for himself. And then you were also open to it and went to the show, and there it unfolded. So this curiosity, as Kim was saying, creates this abundance. And we're in the present moment at that show. If you said, like, if you had just been go, 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 you would have missed it. But you were fully present and open to receive. And look at how that all unfolded. And then the TED Talk, what a beautiful story.
I think I just want to add in too that it does take so much awareness, self-awareness. It takes so much going inward, because I know for myself, when I was young, and I don't know if this is just normally how it goes for young people, and that as we get older, we become more wise. But I was like this tunnel vision, right? Like you said, you had this plan for yourself. You were going to finish school. You were going to get the job, work in New York City, like tunnel vision. And so that when those what if situations, or those situations, like the fear sets in, my mindset was too rigid to be open, like that openness and that curiosity. And not only that, but I thought I had the answers. So it was just like, I was in that box. So I think it takes something to get out of that pattern. Would you agree?
100%. And I feel like for you, Kim, it was your diagnosis that kind of broke you open and made you evolve into this whole other version of yourself, right?
Yeah, that's true. It was a defining moment for me.
Yeah. And for me, it wasn't just getting Brandon's diagnosis, but it was literally seeing all these struggles that he continuously would have, especially, you know, during the middle school years and through high school. He was so severely cyberbullied that we had to pull him out his junior year of high school. And that kind of broke both of us open in different ways. I ended up getting diagnosed with shingles. And I remember I was 50 years old and I went to the doctor and she gave me this diagnosis. And I said, how could that be? I thought this was like an older person's disease. And she said, I'm diagnosing younger and younger women.
Really?
And I'm going to tell you right now, it's all due to stress.
Right.
So that was my wake up call that, you know what, like, you think you need to have a handle on Brandon's future. And now, like, the whole thing blew up. I had no idea whether he would even end up graduating high school after we pulled him out. And then I get this diagnosis and it forced me to let go. And because of that, I think it created space for him to come up with his own solutions. So he ended up meeting with administration and again, innovated his own solution and said to them, listen, I'll just finish school online. And at that point, the online options weren't as strong as they are right now.
Yeah.
So he soon realized that he was bored out of his mind, but he learned to hack the system and he did all of his work at night. He freed up his day. He knew his dream was to become a professional speaker. So he said, why do I need to first graduate high school? I might as well start now. So he started connecting with professional networking groups, giving talks at their meetings, and every single meeting opened up more and more connection to more opportunities. And that led us to Tony Robbins a few months later. So Brandon and I did Tony's Unleash the Power Within as Tony's guests. We literally sat in the front row section and experienced this soul breaking event, you know, 3.5 days long, where you literally take this inward plunge. We both walked on fire. We came out of there so excited about life and the future. And as a result, Brandon created these tremendous goals for himself to become the youngest member of the National Speakers Association, which he did right before he turned 18. to publish his first book, which he did a year later. And we realized that everything that we were going through, as Tony says, was happening for us. And it wasn't something that we needed to feel badly about. It was unearthing all these hidden gifts that we had within us, because you don't really know your own strength and your own resilience until you're thrown off course, right? Until you have to come up, take a deep breath and realize, okay, I don't want to continue living my life this way. I can design it a different way. So it really led to some incredible things.
That's fantastic. Would you say that, so Brandon, you just said 22, right?
Mm-hmm.
So would you say that's more of like his innate personality to be that way, or was it his situation that, because that's very, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, to be that open and that curious and to take such life experiences and to transform it and to be on Tony Robbins and to be so proactive and initiating, to me at that young age, is really forward thinking. Is that his personality to be that way, or was it his life circumstance? Or a combination of?
Well, I think his life circumstance made him an old soul from the very beginning.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I just remember ever since he started talking, he had a much easier time relating to grownups than he did to kids. And so definitely it gave him a sense of intuitiveness and curiosity. But it wasn't until he went through that very painful experience at the age of 17 when we had to pull him out of high school.
Yeah.
That was what led him to be open to the journey, to going to Tony Robbins, to doing all that work. And the other thing that we did was very early on, although Brandon learned to be a very self-sufficient and strong self-advocate and went to the administration with screenshots showing that this cyberbullying stemmed from his schoolmates, what we quickly learned is that our laws protect freedom of speech more than they protect victims of cyberbullying. That was a hard pill to swallow, as was the lack of support that we received from the school. So we decided to go to work, and we testified at the Virginia General Assembly. And as a result of sharing our story, we helped get 2 pieces of legislation passed into law. The second of which requires that empathy be taught in all Virginia public schools starting in kindergarten. So the fact that they are now putting more of an emphasis on emotional intelligence is something that really warms our hearts, knowing that hopefully this, coming up generation of students will better understand to see things through the lens of someone else, rather than just, make fun of them because of their differences.
That is fantastic. That's awesome. That gives me chills. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Tia, any last minute questions before we start to round up?
I don't have any last minute questions. I just want to thank you for being open to pivoting, being open to curiosity, because with your ability to do that, you also guided Brandon. I think he had his own innate ability, but if he had had different parents, that may have been squashed. So I want to also honor your role in all of this work of creating curiosity and allowing Brandon to really step into his own inner empowerment and make all these differences that you're both doing separately and together. And it's just such important work, and knowing that you're influencing generations to come and making real drastic change that the world needs. So
I appreciate those beautiful words so very much. And I feel like that we as parents can all hone into a sense of curiosity and really embrace the fact that our kids are not an extension of us, that they are creating their own path, and that their journey is not always going to be a linear one. And the more that we are there as, their guides or their consultants rather than their directors, the more we empower them to dream bigger. And you know what? If they fall and they fail, they will figure out how to get back up. Like that's an amazing muscle for them to strengthen over time as well. That's a life skill that will carry them really far.
Definitely, definitely. So how we wrap it up, we're going to ask you 5 quick questions. So trust your intuition, right? And enter curiosity. We'll do both. So as you know, our podcast is called Masks Off. So we all wear our masks, our people pleaser mask, perfectionist mask, whatever that is. Certainty mask, maybe for some people. So what's the most prominent mask that you've worn and still kind of shows up in your life?
The mask that I've worn is the mask of control. That, even though I am curious and even though I pride myself on navigating uncertainty, I really try to be so detail oriented and control so many things to create a sense of calm that I find that I need to take that mask off many, many times to make people not go crazy.
All right. If you could go anywhere in the world, where would you go right now?
Oh, wow. I've heard beautiful things about Fiji. I would love to experience the nature and the beauty of Fiji.
Oh, sounds pretty nice right now.
Yeah.
Sitting on a beach, exploring that. What is your favorite way to take care of yourself?
I love to get out in nature. And so whether I'm traveling or I'm at home, I try to take morning walks in nature that just, sorry about that, that enable me to stay curious and look out for beautiful flowers and foliage and animals. And I feel like it clears my head in a way that nothing else does. So that to me is like the best medicine.
I hear you on that one. And I know Kim,
Me too.
you do as well. So if you have a bucket list or whatever you want to call it, what would be at the top of that list?
At the top of the list would just be to continue to create impact by writing and speaking and sharing and creating space for people to realize that the only limitations that we have are the ones that we place on ourselves, and that we don't need to have our kids' future all spelled out, and to embrace the zigs and zags that come along with life.
Love it. Love it.
Yeah, that's good.
And the last question before Kim wraps up for us is, what is one book that's changed your life?
Oh my gosh. It's a book that I actually read recently called The Choice, by Holocaust survivor Edith Eger. She is in her mid-90s and she is just a dynamo force of nature who reinvented her life and went through the most horrific experiences. And if you're familiar with the work of Viktor Frankl, he was one of her mentors. They've done some talks together, but just to see perspective from her lens, and it just makes us realize that no matter what we have gone through or are going through, our mindset is what determines how we're going to experience life.
Definitely, definitely. And so beautifully in line with that uncertainty and curiosity as well. Ooh, I'm going to have to read that one. It has been on my list, but I'm going to put up to the top. So,
and her newer book is called The Gift.
That's the one. Yeah. I thought there was a new
So
one.
I read The Gift first, but then I knew I had to read The Choice after that. And they're both excellent.
Great. Thank you.
Awesome. So thank you so much for being on the show, and we'll have everything in the show notes, but if people want to know how to reach you, what's the best way how can they find you or contact you?
Sure. So on social media, on Instagram and Facebook, I am on Speak Beyond Words with an S at the end.
Yeah.
You could find the work that Brandon and I do on his website, brandonfarbstein.com, where you could also find his book, 10 Feet Tall, which is his first book, and his soon to be released children's book called A Kid's Book About Self-Love. I'm also on Instagram and Clubhouse under Sylvia Farbstein.
Great.
Awesome. So many ways to find you, and there should be tons of ways to find you. So that'll all be in the show notes for sure. And like Tia was saying earlier, I'm just so grateful that you shared your story with us and with our listeners. It was so inspiring. I just feel like, anytime I'm like, what, about anything in the future, it's just like, okay, stop, pause, take a deep breath. And how can I look at this differently from a place of curiosity, of openness? So I really feel like I've gotten something very valuable today. So thank you.
Oh, I appreciate both of you so much for spending this time with me and creating this space on this amazing platform.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
So thank you everybody for listening, and you can find us on YouTube. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, and any of your favorite platforms. So again, thank you so much for being with us today, and have a great and wonderful day.
Take care, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.